All right, shout out to Jackson for joining us. And so I said at the top of the show that we were going to have the main discussion topic be about Kismet. And while that segment with Jackson, it was pretty lengthy and it's probably the longest part of the podcast. The reason why I say I still categorize this as the main discussion topic, because this is the meat and potatoes I want you to walk away from. I want you to walk away from this podcast thinking about this term, how it applies to your life, not necessarily changing your mindset, but hopefully opening up your mindset to something new. And so the word Kismet, right? It's defined simply as destiny or fate. But to bring that a little bit deeper, the word Kismet is derivative of an Arabic word Kismet, meaning division, portion, or lot. Kismet can mean your lot in life. It can mean your fate. It can also be used to describe something significant that happened for you or to you completely of chance, right? So the different ways that Kismet can be used, and we kind of just went over that, is it can be used as a rank, your place in life. It can be used to describe bliss, pure happiness. It can be used to describe fate, or it can be used to describe a choice that you make based off intuition. So to get it even further into this idea of Kismet, right? Let's first talk about what Kismet is not. And Kismet is not logic, right? So often we think that the way that we plan, the way that we are strategic, the way that we try to force things can bring about that we deserved it, we earned it. And while those things can be true, the idea and thought behind Kismet is that it's something divine. It's something that it removes ego. And so that's one of the things that Kismet is not. It's not, you can't think your way into a place of Kismet. You can't think your way or force your way or plan your way into a place of being able to see how Kismet affects your life. 2, Kismet is not deserved, right? You can't, we often try to think that if we do good things, karma, and those things are true, right? Karma is real. I very well think that karma, and I believe that karma is real, but it's when we think about the place of Kismet, it's such a destiny. Such a thing that comes from a higher power. It comes from, like I said, it's your destiny that you can't necessarily deserve it, right? It's going to come one way or another. Now we can work our way into deserving it after we get it sometimes, and sometimes we do deserve it before we get it, but it's still not something that is necessarily deserved. Your ego, the human ego, will have you think that when good things happen to you, it is because we worked hard, we deserved it, or because of our merit, right? And that's how we kind of self-empower ourselves mentally. And Kismet is not that. One last thing that Kismet is not, it is not material success. So we often try to think of success in a way of like, how much money did we get from it? What did we gain from it? Were we able to buy XYZ? Destiny is not that. Like we always think that like when the way that we earn things, the way that things are coming from us, we often place that just upon material things that come into our house, whether it's a house that we get, it's a car that we get. For me, for example, like shit with my cameras, right? And we often think about it in that way. And so the magic of Kismet is not necessarily a material thing. Now, material success can be a byproduct of Kismet, but it's not Kismet solely. It's not one and the same thing. So now that we define what it isn't, let's talk about what it is. Kismet is intuition, right? And sometimes being intuitive means being the opposite of logical. When you feel intuition sometimes and something comes around, it means that regardless of how things look, regardless of how they appear, is that we figure it out, right? And we often like to think of things as clearly defined and understood, laid out steps. That it's something systematic, right? It can be traced back to a beginning, a middle, and an end. Kismet is not like that. Kismet is a web, right? When you think about all of the decisions, all of the things that happened in your life, all of the things that also the decisions that you did not make. Kismet is very much that. It's a web that the way that it traces all interconnected. So it's not necessarily a series of steps that you made to get to a certain place, but sometimes, like I said, it's that web, the things that connect to each other that you don't necessarily see because it's not a clear outline between A and B. It happens in multitudes, right? And so the outcomes that come up don't always go back to when we talked about Kismet being intuition instead of logic sometimes, but we don't always fully understand how we get to that place. We don't fully understand the byproduct of Kismet. We don't fully understand the place in which we got there. So in a way, Kismet is very much like good karma, but it's also when actions, truth, and reality and things all flow together for your benefit, right? It's that sense of being in the right place in the right time, more so than you plan to be there. So it's more of a flow and cognitive dissonance, if I can talk correctly. And sometimes when we think about Kismet, it means that against all the odds of how things looked, it still worked out in a way for us, right? So let's talk about, now we defined what Kismet is, what it isn't. Let's talk about how to experience Kismet, right? Because regardless of these things happen to you or around you, like we talk about, it's a web, right? So it's a thing of interconnected decisions or actions or things that did not happen, things that you avoided, things that you didn't even know that you kind of avoided. So if we're talking about Kismet in that way, right? The first way that we can experience and realize when we are experiencing Kismet is to get curious or to have self-awareness, right? Having that self-awareness is one of the key things that will help you really start processing where this thing of Kismet comes into your life, right? You have to be self-aware. You also have to not be preoccupied with the things that you are doing to reach a certain destination, but appreciate where you ended up, sometimes regardless of what the destination was that you planned to be at. And if you listen to me and Jackson talk, we both talked about how neither one of us planned to get into video. Neither one of us had a plan when we initially started this journey to be people who produce short films and did photography and did videography for we didn't have that plan. But that web of interconnected decisions, for me, for one, I talk about a lot on this podcast. Me starting a podcast, learning to promote it, stepping outside my box, wanting to promote it even better with video, learning video has now turned into a passion and something that I'm really, really great at. But it wasn't because I sit there and I outline, oh, I want to go to school for this. This is what I know I want to do. I never would have been able to put together a plan that placed me where I am now. That was nothing but destiny and fate and Kismet working into it. Second thing on how to experience it is stop making fear-based decisions, meaning that take away, completely remove the absence of, and Jackson touched on this, looking stupid, things not working out. Remove those fear-based decisions. Sometimes when you operate in a place of fearlessness and you make decisions to break the homeostasis that fear puts us in sometimes, it makes us step outside our box, right? When we constantly make decisions based off fear, whether it means that we're fearful of losing our job, we're fearful of not making enough money, we're fearful of not being successful, we're fearful of not being able to do it or to be good at it, right? We take away an experience for growth from us, right? So decisions should not be led by fear, but by curiosity. And that constant curiosity and adding self-awareness of that will put you in a place where you start seeing the way that this Kismet thing affects your life. Number 3, trust, right? We talked about having the intuition, right? But for intuition to take effect in your life, you have to learn to trust that intuition, right? And that puts us in a place of experience Kismet, right? If we stop, as we said before, if you notice there's a theme, if we stop worrying about getting caught up in feeling foolish, or we denying what we really want, if we insisting on doing something just because we desire a certain outcome, right? And if you lean on that intuition, if you lean on sometimes things being coincidence and trusting that, then you find your place being able to experience and appreciate Kismet in such a much better place. And lastly, how do we experience Kismet? The last thing before I send you guys home is interpretation and openness. We have to be able to interpret the things that are happening around us. Again, we talked about that web and connections, right? If we appreciate the fate, the magic of Kismet in our lives and that are placed upon us, that destiny, and realizing our destiny, ultimately, we have to interpret the things that have happened in our life. We have to learn to look back and say, okay, this is a decision that I was going to make, or I would have made. I didn't make that. Maybe it was made for me. Maybe I was taken out of that place of being able to make that decision and things kind of just happened the way that they happened. But because we did that, and now we can interpret that, and we can be open and honest with ourselves that, admitting that we didn't cause that, or maybe we would have, if we were in complete control, right? We wouldn't have ended up in a positive place. But when you learn that power of interpretation, when you learn that power of being open mentally and holding yourself accountable and really realizing the things that the extraordinary things that are happening around you, right? We talk about epiphanies a lot. We talk about dreams. We talk about manifestation, which is a key thing now. All of them are meaningless if we don't know how to interpret and be truly open about those things, right? So no one meaning is absolute. That's the key thing in this Kismet thing, is that there are no absolutes. Nothing is absolute. And once you start realizing that, you'll start seeing how things can change and for the better. So, lastly, right? Kismet has us loosen our definition of success, go with our gut, and restore our faith in powerful things happening around us, but not because of us necessarily, right? For some people, they feel like, and I know this is a big thing, some people really feel like everything that happens in their life is a direct reflection of them and the decision that they make. And I'm not here to challenge that thinking, right? If that's how you think, more power to you, and if it's working for you. But I truly believe in the power of this thing of Kismet and some things just being destiny. Because me, the place that I'm in now, would have never in a million years guessed this for myself. So in hearing me and Jackson talk, that's some things that I hope everyone takes away from it. But that's it. That's been this episode of the Awaken Soul Podcast. Make sure you follow the podcast at Awaken Soul Pod. You can follow me personally at CEO Haize. That's CEO Haize. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, theawakensoulpod@gmail.com. We are the #1 podcast for the culture. And this week, we're out. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.